Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, pets of all species, welcome back to Guns and Mental Health by Walk the Talk America. I am merely the co-host, Jake Wiskerson, joined in Las Vegas by the co-host, Michael Sudini, and all the way from New Jersey, Kelly Sutliff, licensed professional counselor, national certified counselor, and she has got one heck of a story to tell. I'm glad I'm doing this well. It's been a few months, and I think I nailed the intro. Just going to self-congratulate there.
We can only imagine that you did because you cut out. This wouldn't be a Walk
My
the Talk
thing is
America
literally
podcast.
saying trying to reconnect right now. That's so typical. I killed it though. I killed it. I really did. Kelly, welcome to the show and our collective grease fire, as we like to call it. It's not a WTTA podcast without a clunky intro. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you for having me.
Are we really that clunky right now? I've got 30% upload.
Hey, it's okay. Listen, I want to real Kevin. Quick. I want to. Yeah, this is our. Yeah, I'm gonna set the stage because Kelly, I think we're close enough now. But to tell your story, how I found out about your incredible story was I was doing household chores and I had HBO Max on, and the show that I was watching had ended, but I didn't change it because I really wasn't watching television, right? And then there's a show called Toxic that came on. And at first I was like, I'm kind of in the mood for comedy, so maybe I'll change it. And then basically, like, I heard your voice and I was like, she's got to be from New Jersey. And the show's called Toxic. And being that I was raised in New Jersey and I married someone from New Jersey, I was like, this is going to be fireworks. Whatever fight these people have gotten themselves into, it's going to be fireworks. Because I always joke around. I'm like, fighting for couples in New Jersey is like a love language. Sometimes that's the way we say I love you, is these like passionate blow up fights where, you know, when I dated girls that weren't from New Jersey, sometimes they didn't understand like the directness and everything like that. But that was the start. That's how it stayed on the television, right? But I was only half paying attention until the story got, you know, there's an element with your dog and stuff where it really made me stop. Because I'm a dog lover and so are you. And there's a part of this story where, you know, it's almost like a cliffhanger at some point, like you think the dog's going to die. And like, that's a huge no for me in my world. So I stopped everything I was doing and then started focusing on the story. And so then I hit rewind, right? So it's like, let me get it from the beginning. And then all of a sudden it transitions from this like cautionary tale about like choosing somebody and relationships. And then it just goes right into everything that Walk the Talk America is about. And it becomes a 2A issue. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to get a hold of this person. She's probably going to think I'm a nut job, like contacting her through, I don't even know if you had social media, you know what I mean? But I was just like, I have to have her on the show because as Jake said in the intro, this is everything that Walk the Talk America is about in terms of like the discussions we have around red flag laws and the cautionary tales of, you know, unintentional consequences of these feel good legislation that people think is actually saving lives. It's not. So I just wanted to say, I'm so excited to have you on and to talk about this. And I really feel like this may be the first time that you're actually talking to a show that's kind of born from the firearms industry. And I think the story's going to blow up.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I think this is the perfect place to really go into, you know, what happened with the issue with the 2A. So thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and before we kick it off, why don't you tell the listening audience a little bit about your background and who you are, because you're also a therapist, which is just like amazing. Like I said, that there's this connection with us.
Right. So obviously my name is Kelly Sutliff. I am a licensed psychotherapist in the state of New Jersey, and I've been a licensed professional counselor now, oh my gosh, I think since the year of 2006. I started off my career working at the Morris County Sexual Assault Center, so with survivors of sexual trauma. And then I worked as a crisis counselor in a local high school for about 12 years, where at the same time, I also opened up a part-time private practice. So I've now been in private practice for about 15 years or so. And I also am a former adjunct professor in the graduate psychology department at both Kane University and the College of St. Elizabeth. So I've really, built my whole working career out of working in the field of counseling and in helping people. I'm also a huge dog lover. The dog that you see in the show that I was in, Toxic, that would have been my rescue dog, Chester. He has since sadly passed away. But yeah, like Mike said, there was that big cliffhanger in the show where I'm sure we'll get more into it, but there was a point where I was able to escape that night, and I made the decision to run back into the house where I knew my life was in danger by my now ex-husband, to save my dog. That is how passionate and how much I love animals, specifically dogs. And now I have a nonprofit organization called Kelly's Canines Tales of Courage that was really born out of this entire situation. At one point, and I'm sure we'll get more into it as well, but at one point I was feeling so unsafe because of what happened to me, especially, when my gun was taken away from me, that I got my own protection dog. And since then, I now have 3 of my own personal protection dogs that are trained in protection and bite work. And about a year and a half ago, I thought to myself, I really want to be able to give back what these dogs have done for me, both the physical and the emotional safety that they provided me. So that's really how Kelly's Canines was born. And we provide domestic violence survivors with trained protection dogs free of charge.
And that concludes our podcast. Thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm still waiting for, I teased Kelly over email that I wanted a German Shepherd puppy shipped to me because I have 2 elderly dogs that are probably not long for this earth, but I don't think that she's able to mail me a dog, but they're adorable. I want to hear more about I guess your mindset, therapist to therapist. This is kind of fun for me. We don't often get to pick into people's brains from our angle, right? But I want to hear more about your mindset that evening, because I know there's a lot of adrenaline, there's a lot of cortisol flying around when you're in a hostile situation, especially when you've finally made the decision to leave, which presumably you did at that point. And I didn't watch the show, admittedly, so I'm hearing this for the first time. But what's your mindset when you go back in and try to save the dog? Like I've dealt with, just to frame it up for the audience, I don't want to rabbit trail this too much, but I've dealt with my fair share of DV survivors and perpetrators, and the animals are often the people, the ones that keep the people there. It's children and animals that keep, usually women, so I'm just going to default to the statistical prevalence, to keep women in domestically violent situations longer than they would like to. To go back is not surprising, but to leave and then go back is something remarkable. I'd like to hear more about that, just for everybody who's listening, to get a little peek behind the curtain into the window of a now survivor, but then a victim who's really trying to flee. Like what's going on there? Help us understand that.
Yeah. So, that night, for those of you who've seen it, Chris was completely out of control. So he was completely destroying my house while intermittently assaulting me multiple times. He strangled me 3 separate times that night, held a military knife to my throat, threw my head through a sheetrock wall where I lost consciousness, threw me then again into the bedside table where I once again lost consciousness. And then at one point, he poured a bottle of Xanax down my throat, trying to get me to swallow the pills to kill myself. And all while doing that, he's intermittently destroying my home. So I knew that, and Chris told me that it was just a matter of time that night that he was going to kill me. So I knew at one point I was upstairs and I could hear him destroying the kitchen, and I couldn't find a phone at that point. What I didn't know then that I know now is that one of my 911 calls that I tried to make. So every time I would get the phone to call 911, that's when Chris would strangle me. He would run into the room, grab the phone, throw it. What I didn't know then is that one of my 911 calls went through. And actually, I didn't even find out until about 2 years ago. The operator picked up, and Chris is on the phone with the operator saying, "Oh, sorry, it's a mistake. We're good. Click." Now, I didn't know any of that happened.
Let me interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
How long ago was this?
So this happened December 16th, 2019.
Okay.
So we're going on.
So quite a bit of time passed before you even realized that. Okay.
Right.
Thank you for letting me know.
Right. Absolutely. So at this point, now I hear Chris in the kitchen. I'm upstairs having no idea that 911 call went through. I'm just thinking He's going to kill me. My dog Chester was hiding during all of this. I believe he was hiding downstairs because Chris spent most of the time destroying the upstairs and the kitchen and the dining room. So even though Chris went throughout the entire house, except his own office, to destroy everything, I think Chester was hiding downstairs. So I knew that I had to get out of the house to have my neighbors or someone call 911. So when I heard Chris destroying the kitchen, I knew that was the only time I could get out without Chris seeing me. And Chester at the time, he was a rescue. So we believe he was about 10 or 11 years old. He also had kidney disease. I knew that that dog would not even be able to run with me the way I needed to run. So that's why I didn't take him with me. I was actually almost afraid that if I ran out and ran with him, like that would kill him, that kind of a run. So what I did was I quickly went downstairs while Chris was destroying the kitchen. He didn't see me. I saw Chester. I grabbed Chester, pushed him, not hard, obviously. I kind of guided him down into the basement, shut the door, and then took off out the front to my neighbor's house. Thank God they were home. I was knocking on their door. They opened the door, but from their house where I was in the foyer, I could see into my bay window, and I saw Chris smearing his blood all over my bay window. And then I saw him start to walk towards the basement. And that's where I hid Chester. And I just knew that if he realized I got out of the house, and I think he was going into the basement to look for me because he probably thought I was hiding there. But that's where I hid Chester. And I knew the minute that he realized I wasn't hiding down there and he saw Chester, I didn't doubt for 1 minute he would have killed Chester because, if he really wanted to hurt me, Chris, he would kill my dog because that's what I loved most in life. So in that moment when I was at my neighbor's, I started screaming, I need to go back. And my one neighbor, Frank, he was kind of holding me in a bear hug because I had collapsed on their foyer floor. And he was holding me and I'm trying to wiggle out. And I'm saying, I have to go back. He's going to kill Chester. He's going to kill Chester. And my neighbor, Frank, is like, no, you are not going back. If you go back, I'm going with you. And that's when I said, Frank, he's going to kill you. So in that moment, I wiggled free from Frank and I took off back to my house. And what I didn't know then that I know that now is because my 911 call did go through, the police literally were pulling up and saw me running back into the house. And when I ran back into the house, my smart dog, he must have literally sat at the top steps where coming up from my basement. So when Chris opened the door, I think Chester ran out. So when it was all literally divine timing, when I ran in, Chester was right in front of me. I grabbed Chester, put him into my office, and then just slammed the basement door shut. And on the Ring video, you can hear when I slam that basement door shut, Chris just starts screaming, probably because he realized I was not down there. Now I just slammed the basement door on him and I just barricaded the door with my body and looked to my right and I saw a flashlight and the police came in.
It's amazing. Did he go down peacefully or with a fight, or how did the rest of it go? Because you can't leave us there.
Right. So he didn't really go down peacefully. From what I was told, when the police came in, they grabbed me and took me into my living room where I just, people always say like they don't understand how I got through that night. And kind of going back, Jake, to what you said before, I honestly think being a therapist is really what helped me, get through that. And you'll understand this. Like we are to act in a crisis. So I am crisis trained. So in that moment, my brain completely shut down visually. I still to this day don't have that much memory. It's like bits and pieces visually, but auditory, my senses that night were so heightened. I think because I'm trained to act in a crisis, that's how I was able to make it out of there alive that night, because it was just kind of like, this is what I got to do. This is what I got to do. And then after it was over is when my emotions kicked in and I really realized what had just happened, or started to realize what had just happened, because my memory didn't really start coming back until a few days later. But when the police ran in, they had opened, and it was, from what I was told, anyone who was on that night showed up at the house. I mean, my street was just lined with cop cars and ambulances and fire trucks. The police stormed in, guns drawn. They opened up the basement door, and from what I was told, Chris was literally halfway up the steps with a knife. So if they hadn't come in at that time, I don't think I'd be here today. And they start, and there's actually on the Ring video, you hear the police screaming at him to get down and whatnot. And he just starts screaming, I did all of this. I've killed people before, because he's a veteran. Although, I will say there now is a lot of talk that, what Chris tells you about his time in the military is not true. But he's, going on and on about how he's killed people and he did all of this, and they're giving him directions that he is not following. And eventually he complies and he's taken to the hospital.
I want to know about the show very briefly, because this happened in 2019. Certainly there weren't cameras on scene. What do? They recreate that? Is that how that works? Or what was it like having to go through it, but also like what were the mechanics of making a show about this episode? And I promise for the audience, we will get into the gun thing in a moment, but I just want to appropriately set the backdrop here too.
And real quick, because I saw the show, right? When you see what he did, when you see the crime scene photos, I mean, you'd think that he slaughtered 10 people in that house. It's insanity. Like, it's mind blowing, especially like what he did to himself, what he did to you, like the damage he did to the house. You just wouldn't even think a human could do that.
And he did that all in 45 minutes. It's, I was able to, get money back for the damage that he did to the house. I estimate he did well over $100,000 worth of damage to the house that night. However, I only had the receipts for $63,000 worth of damage. But that is just how much damage that man did in 45 minutes. Because, and I'm sure we'll get into this when we talk a little bit more about the gun, but I had left the house around, I would say 15 that night to bring my gun out of the house that night. And when I left, my house was in mint condition. When I came back about, I'd say 6:40-ish, my house was fine. And then by 7:15 that night, there was $100,000 worth of damage done to my house.
How did HBO find you? How did Max find you?
So I started posting online. I started posting on Instagram in, I believe it was the fall of 2020. And the prosecutor's office caught wind. They weren't happy about it. And they basically kind of were like, you need to shut it down. It could really impact Chris's criminal trial in a negative way. And I didn't want to do that. So I always knew that I would start really talking about my story and my situation once the criminal proceedings were over. And in October of 2022, Chris ended up taking a plea deal. And after that, I started posting on TikTok. And my my one video has close to 18 million views, just went viral. And for a little while, I was contacted by a few different platforms to do things, and nothing ever felt right. They really a lot of people that contacted me wanted to focus on that night. And I kept saying, but there's so much more. Like that night, in comparison to everything else that I had been through, was the easiest thing. Everything that happened afterwards is what was important for me to talk about. And one day I got an email from a producer of Toxic, and she just kind of said, hey, listen, I saw your TikToks and this is what we're doing. We have a new series coming out with Elizabeth Chambers, who was formerly married to Armie Hammer. And we're really focused on the survivor story. We're not trying to glorify anything. We really are just here to tell your story and get the truth out there. And I spoke with her and I just kind of thought, wow, this is a fit, because they didn't want to just focus on that night. They wanted to tell the whole story as much as they could in a 43-minute episode. So I think they did an awesome job for having 43 minutes. But, this situation lasted for over 4 years for me. So they got as much as they could in. So that's how they found me. They found me on TikTok.
Okay. Because we don't want to center it entirely on that night. We only have so much time on this podcast. Where do we want to go with this? Let's ask the obvious question for the listening audience, which is, and we've already tacitly agreed. I want to have you on Noggin Notes, and I want you to share the entire DV experience. Is really my own bias, and I want you to help other therapists to understand this better. But for our audience here on Guns and Mental Health, what's up with the gun? What happened with that? And where are we now? And I will give you no more direction.
So I think it's important to explain a little bit about my history with guns. So I first got my gun in 2015, and I was a smart gun owner. I took lessons for a really long time, like a simulation, even before I got a gun. And then once I got my gun, I still took lessons. And this was back in 2015. And, I wasn't that active with my gun. I didn't go to shooting ranges a lot. To be honest with you, that year that I really practiced and took lessons with my gun, I don't think I took my gun out to go shooting until September of 2019. My best friend, Christina, and I decided that we were going to go to the gun range, kind of like a girl date. So we went to the gun range in September of 2019. He was a licensed gun owner as well. And we took a lesson. And at this lesson, I remember his name was Tom, the instructor. Tom says to me, "Hey, your magazine is illegal." And I'm like, "What? Like, what do you mean it's illegal?" So this is one thing the show did get wrong. They said that I had a 20 bullet magazine. It was not a 20 bullet magazine. I had a 12 bullet magazine. So in the state of New Jersey, which I was totally unaware of, recently a law went into effect that my magazine was considered a high capacity magazine with those 2 extra bullets. So Tom tells me, "Your magazine's illegal. This is a felony. You could go to jail." So I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. So now I have 2 magazines. He says to me, "Listen, I'm going to discard of the 1 magazine, but I don't want to leave you without a magazine. God forbid you get home today and someone's in your house and now you have no magazine or bullets. But what I'm going to do," he says, "is I'm going to take out the 2 extra bullets. So God forbid you're on your way home and you get pulled over. Like, yeah, you have this illegal magazine, but we've now taken the 2 bullets out." So I said, "Okay." So he said, "When you get home, figure out how you're going to discard of it. Get your new magazine first." So I'm like, absolutely. So I'm married to the time to Chris, who is a veteran, who I think has a gun license. Now, he didn't have any guns in the house that I was aware of. I have no proof of, but I do think he had guns in the house that I did not know about. So it was just my gun that was the known gun in the house. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go home and tell my husband and we're going to figure out, let's get a new magazine and discard of this old one. So I get home and I say to Chris, "Hey, did you know about this new law?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "All right, well, this is illegal." So he said, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." So I'm like, okay. Because at this point in our relationship, I also think it's important to mention up until December 2019, I would have told you I had the most perfect husband in the world. Chris never laid a hand on me. We barely ever had a fight. So the night he almost killed me and wanted to kill me, that was the first time that Chris ever laid a hand on me. So in September of 2019, I'm not thinking there's any reason to doubt my husband. So, okay, he's going to take care of it for me. He had the codes to the safe. I'm thinking he's going to take care of it for me. So the night of the incident, before everything happened during that day, when I had woken up, I found these inappropriate messages that Chris was sending to another woman. That's how this all started. It began in the early morning where found these messages. I was obviously very upset. Chris refused to leave the house. We weren't really fighting, but he kept bothering me. He kept coming in and out of the bedroom where I was, asking me if I was going to leave him. The reason I bring this up is because at one point I had called my best friend, Christina, who is the one that went to the gun range with me, to tell her what was going on. And Chris did not know that I told Christina. And I was on the phone with Christina, and Chris was coming into the bedroom, and he tried to get into my safe. And at that point, I had changed the code to my safe. Because when I found all of these messages that he had been sending to another woman, the first thought in my head was, I don't know who I'm married to. So I didn't think he'd hurt me. I didn't think he'd hurt himself, but I'd watched a lot of true crime by that point. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't know who I'm married to, so I don't know what he's capable of, right? So I changed the codes to my safe. And thank God I did that, because he came into the bedroom and he tried to get into my safe. And I can remember thinking and saying to Chris, why are you trying to get into my safe? And that's where my gun was. And he said, oh, I need my checkbook. And I said, you have your checkbook. And then he said, you changed the codes to the safe? And I said, yeah, and you have no right to ask me any questions today. So he leaves the room. Then a little while later, he comes back into the room and he says, hit me. And I'm sitting on the bed, and I looked at him and I said, Chris, I've never laid a hand on you, and I'm certainly not going to start today. And he said, yeah, but you'll feel better if you hit me. And I turned to him and I said, I am not in physical pain. I am in emotional pain for what you did to me. And I said to him, the type of pain I am in is like this. Like, I would take my gun and shoot myself in the head in front of you. So you have to live with that for the rest of your life before I ever lay a hand on you. And he storms out of the room. So I call Christina and I tell her what just happened. And as I'm on the phone with her, he beeps in to Christina. So I tell her to answer it. She answers the phone and he says to her, Kelly just said she's going to shoot me with her gun. Now, Christina knows I didn't say that. So they get off the phone. She calls me right back, tells me what he said. So then I'm now thinking, gun's got to go. I don't know why now he is lying about this gun. Again, it's still not going through my head that maybe he wanted to kill me with the gun or make it look like I was trying to hurt him with the gun. I'm just thinking to myself, gun has got to be out of this house, because why are you talking about my gun? So I start getting ready, because I had not changed out of my pajamas all day. And now it's later in the day. It's probably around 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I go into my safe where the gun is. I take the shell of the gun. I'm not, at this point, not noticing it's still the old magazine. At this point, I'm thinking my husband takes care of the illegal magazine. I actually leave the bullets and the magazine in my safe, and I just take the shell of the gun in the gun case, and I'm getting ready to take it out of the house. Chris sees that I'm taking the gun out of the house. He sees the gun case, and he starts freaking out. Where are you taking the gun? Why are you taking the gun? Because I still, till this day, believe that Chris wanted to kill me with my own gun and make it look like self-defense, like I was attacking him and, he had to kill me. So when he realizes I'm taking the gun out of the house, he's freaking out. And I eventually kind of push past him and I get in my car. And I'm bringing the gun to my sister's house, who I gave her a heads up that I was coming over. I called, I think it was my brother-in-law, really quick, because they were gun owners, licensed gun owners. So I figured, let me bring it to their house. I called my brother-in-law and I just said, gun, your house, cheating, not me. So I'm bringing the gun to their house. And on the way back from their house, I start getting all these text messages from Chris, basically saying, I'm coming home to a dead body. Not in that moment realizing he meant me, that I was coming home and I was going to be the dead body. Then when I got home, that's when everything happened. So I bring up that because I think it's important to note that I took the gun out of the house that night. And what happened after that night was about a month and a half after that situation. Now, the gun stayed at my sister's house. I moved into a hotel. I had to live in a hotel for 2.5 months. The gun, again, it's just the shell of the gun. The magazine and the bullets stayed in my safe. The gun stayed at my sister's house, and about a month and a half after the incident, so now we're talking the end of January 2020, I get a call from my sister. It's a Friday night, and she's screaming at me, basically saying to me she got a call from a friend of hers who works at the prosecutor's office. It's the Morris County prosecutor's office, and they're coming for my gun. So I think to myself, okay, I say to my sister, well, it's documented at your house. And she's freaking out. She's saying, no, you've got to come get it. Now I'm saying this is a setup. This is 100% a setup. Why are they coming for my gun now? So I'm thinking in this moment, Chris put drugs in my car. I'm going to jump in my car, go get my gun. I'm getting pulled over. Now I've got a gun and drugs in my car. But there was no rationalizing with my sister, who I don't talk to anymore till this day because of a lot of this stuff that went on. She was like, I'm putting the gun on the porch. Come get your gun. So I'm like, great, I'm screwed. Go to my sister's house, pick up the gun. And now I'm driving like, I know the cops are coming. And I pull up to my house and I bring the gun up to the safe. I put it in the safe. And again, it's in the case. So I put the case and the shell of the gun back into my safe. And the thing is, when I pulled up, if you watch the show, they don't necessarily explain this part in the show. But when I pulled up to my house, again, I had recognized that Chris went and had me red flagged. So he went to the prosecutor's office around 5 o'clock on a Friday to basically say, my ex-wife is a danger, or my wife, because we weren't divorced yet. My wife is a danger to herself and to other people. She also has a high capacity magazine. They decided to come for my gun. So now I realize what is happening at this point. So when I get out of my car to bring my gun back into my house, I just had a feeling he was there. So in Toxic, you actually see me start talking to him. And I don't know if you remember this part, Mike, in Toxic, but you hear me saying, you win, Chris. I give up. I'm saying to him, I know the police are coming. I know you've just had my gun taken away, because I can feel him around. And I go upstairs. I put my gun into my safe. I come back out and I'm locking the door, and I hear this bell ring. It's kind of like it goes ding. And my house is surrounded by woods. So there's a path, and that's where the ding came from. And you see me in Toxic, and from the Ring video, I turn my head and I'm like, Chris. And the next thing you know is I start walking towards my car. The police pull up, and they pull up, and I looked at them. I'm like, you're here for my gun? And they just looked at me and they're like, how do you know? And I said, I don't know. I guess a little bird told me. And then I just start hysterically crying. And I'm saying, I cannot believe you're doing this to me. I cannot believe you are taking away my gun. And they're both saying, listen, we don't want to do this. And I'm saying, yeah, but you're here. You're doing this. So they say, where's your gun? So I'm like, it's in my safe upstairs. So we go to my safe. I open the code to the safe. They pull out my gun. They put it on my mattress that was in my room. They open it up and they pull out the magazine, and it clicks in my head. And I go, my God, the fucking magazine is illegal. And I looked at them. I go, are you gonna arrest me now too? And they don't say anything. They just, collect everything. And now I'm hysterical. So they take the gun. I'm locking up. You can see how hysterical I am. I go back to the hotel. I get out of my car, and where the hotel was, there was a Dunkin' Donuts kind of across the way. I open up my car door and I start getting out, and there is Chris in his car flicking his lights basically letting me know I was right. He just watched the entire thing go down and he peels out. So now I'm even more hysterical because, they've just taken away my only line of defense, which was my gun. So I go into the hotel and the police call me. And I pick up the phone. And at this point, like, I'm just emotionally spent. And I'm like, hello. And they're like, yeah, Kelly, we're going to need you to come down to the police station. So I'm like, what now? You guys just took my gun. What possibly else could you want from me? And they're like, yeah, we opened the gun case and there's an envelope in here with $1,000 in cash. So now I don't remember putting that in there. Now, like, did I put cash around in case I ever needed something last minute? Yes. But I don't remember doing this. And the last thing I want to do is go down to the police station. So I said to them, I was like, listen, just keep it. Just donate it somewhere. I really don't feel like coming to get it. I don't want it. And they're like, well, we really can't do that. We're going to be putting your gun into evidence. So it's easier for you just to come get this now since a Friday. Otherwise, it's going to be much more difficult. So I'm like, fine. So I get off the phone and then it clicks in my head. I'm like, this is a setup. I don't know. I don't remember putting $1,000 in this case. What if Chris also put drugs? So now they're getting me down to the police station where now I'm going to get arrested because there is drugs in this case. They know it's my gun case. And that's not what happened, but I tell that because this is what getting my gun taken away did to me. Now I'm paranoid that the system that is supposed to protect me really just screwed me and is treating me like I'm the perpetrator. So now I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going down to the police station. This is a complete setup and I'm really getting arrested. So I called her back, the officer, and I'm like, I'm not coming. And she's like, well, why not? I'm like, because this is a setup. Who's to say there's not drugs or something else illegal in that gun case? Because I don't remember putting $1,000 in there. And you aren't all waiting there in a line to arrest me when I walk there. And at first she starts laughing, but then I think she realized, look at what we just did to this girl. We just took her gun away. Of course she's going to be so paranoid. So she's like, Kelly, I swear to you up and down, there's nothing illegal in here. We're not arresting you. Come down. So I go down to the police station. Obviously, I'm still hysterical and I'm telling them, call Chris's lawyer, tell him I give up. How could this just happen? There's a restraining order days away. Don't you guys see what he has just done? This was a setup to get me to drop the restraining order. The sergeant came down there to meet me and he basically said to me, he's like, I don't agree with this. I didn't want to do this. And I said, I get that, but you're still here and you just did this. And I said, well, that's it. I'm not cooperating with the state's charges. I'm not going to testify against Chris. And he was like, you have to. And I was like, no, I don't. He was like, yes, you do. And I was like, no, I don't. And he was like, well, we have 347 crime scene photos. So I was like, great, use them because I'm just then not going to testify. And he's like, well, we can keep you safe. And I said, really? Because you guys just took away my fucking gun. What are you going to do? Live with me for the rest of my life? You can't keep me safe because Chris just now utilized the system to make me defenseless. And you all allowed it. And I don't blame the police. It was the prosecutor's office, 100%. The police were just doing what they were forced to and told to do by the prosecutor's office. So then my gun gets taken away. And in that moment, I realized, I need to switch attorneys because the attorney I had at the time, there was no way she was going to handle this. So I end up switching attorneys. And that was able to put the final restraining order off a week or so. But exactly what Chris wanted to happen happened. I ended up dropping the final restraining order because, as I've shared, before publicly and specifically with Mike, what Chris wanted to do was leave me completely defenseless. And I now know that getting a final restraining order against this man is going to really piss him off. And now I have no gun anymore. So I'm completely defenseless. So the last thing I want to do is piss him off even more by getting this final restraining order. So now I agree to drop it. What I also learned at the same time is that the Morris County Prosecutor's Office wanted to charge me with a felony. for that high capacity magazine. And that is something that my lawyers, really had to fight, because the Morris County Prosecutor's Office was really, really gung-ho about charging me with a felony charge, even though they recognized and knew, that I was saying from that minute that Chris set me up. Like, this was a complete setup. He knew that it was an illegal magazine because he knew he never dealt with it. So then I'm now dealing with getting my gun taken away. I'm dealing with, a divorce that Chris is not making easy, his criminal proceedings for the domestic violence charges. And now I'm being threatened with being charged with a felony. So in order to deal with that, in February, I made the decision not only to drop the final restraining order, but it was kind of like a condition of that. If I was dropping the final restraining order, Chris was then dropping the turpo that he got against me. But in order for that turpo to be dropped, I gave away my current fire ID card and my gun. So what I learned from this whole thing is I am the first domestic violence victim in the state of New Jersey to have this happen to have their gun taken away. And I spoke with two individuals that I know who are associated with the NRA. And the one guy said to me, like, we have been waiting for you. Like, you are everything that we were concerned was going to happen with this law, that it would be used against someone in your situation. However, they didn't necessarily want to make a big deal out of it at the time because I was going to get this, but because of my situation. However, they said, if the prosecutor's office does charge you with the felony, that is when we will jump on board. So my lawyer really kind of went to bat, and thankfully I was not charged with the felony, but, in order to, to deal with both those situations of the final restraining order and the turpo getting dropped, I said, okay, you can keep my fire ID card and you can take my gun. Because also, I didn't want that gun because I knew that gun, Chris would have loved nothing more than to kill me with my own gun. So I said to everyone, you know what, you can let Chris know he'll just have to bring his own gun when he comes to kill me, because you guys have all left me in the position of even more susceptible to Chris killing me at this point.
We get a bunch of chatter in the chat, questions, trying to piece things together and whatnot. But I'm going to kind of take these in reverse order, because there's something else implied here, because you went back and you wanted to purchase another gun and you were denied, and we'll get to that in a moment. But just some technical questions, like, what does a final restraining order mean? Are there different levels of those types of POs?
Yeah. So I know things can differ from state to state. So in New Jersey, you have a temporary restraining order. And that is something that, I don't want to say anything's easy to get, but a temporary restraining order is easy to get. So you just really go, you show cause of being concerned for whatever reason, and then you get this TRO, it's called. But then 10 days after the TRO, you have to go for a final restraining order. And that is something in New Jersey that's for life. Getting a final restraining order is something that is incredibly difficult to do. It's literally, there's a trial. So I was going to get a final restraining order, and you really do have a trial where there's a hearing, there's witnesses and whatnot. My ex was creating a circus out of it. And from what I was told, he was literally calling like 19 witnesses to the stand. But after they took away my gun, I was like, that's it. Like, I no longer can get this FRO because this is just going to piss him off even more. So those are the two different restraining orders in New Jersey: a TRO, temporary, and a final FRO.
And you say that temporary is not easy, but it was news to me that I didn't realize that you can almost beat a woman to death and destroy her house and then get a restraining order against her. Right. I would have thought like that already negates like the whole, like you didn't want to be near him at that point. You know
not.
What I mean? Like
there was no communication. And this, again, remember, this is a month and a half after the incident. He's now going to court saying, I think my wife is a danger to herself and other people. Like, and she's got a high capacity magazine. You might want to take this gun away from her. So I remember saying to everyone, do you guys not see what he has just done? Like this again is like another setup. He wants me to drop the restraining order. And they were all kind of like, yeah, we do see that. And I'm like, but you still let it happen. And also, he's the one that attacked me.
Yeah, my clinician hat on here. Of course, I would never dare diagnose somebody I'd never met before, so I'm not doing that. But this is classic narcissism and sociopathy. It doesn't make sense to the listening audience the way that you laid it out. You're like, oh, I didn't know they could do that. But the way that he's framed this, I mean, I got stories upon stories upon stories upon stories of people who have come through my own clinic and told me things like this that are truly on the surface not believable. They're unbelievable because they don't make sense. They don't make linear cognitive sense to the layperson. But if you understand the psychopathy of personality disorders, especially in the cluster B realm, it makes complete sense. They're warping reality into their favor, and they know exactly what they're doing every step of the way. It has nothing to do with him wanting her away from him. It has to do with setting her up to frame her to look like a crazy person so he wins the case. It has nothing to do with like, I can't believe the court would do this. He's accusing her of being a threat to self or others with this firearm, and he constructed the entire thing. Now, the unknowing person who's not in the house didn't see that. All they've got is some photographs and some evidence, which, as we know, when you get into court, all you got to do is like provide a little bit of doubt. Well, that's all you need to do when you're a psychopath, is just provide a little bit of doubt. People go, well, maybe that didn't happen the way I remember. And then before you know it, 2 + 2 = 5. And that's exactly how this stuff staggers in. So it's not at all crazy to me to think that this is the order of events and how they unfolded. And here's the really dastardly, sinister, very pernicious part of all this. It ends up making the victim look like the perpetrator. And that's exactly the whole ploy. It has nothing to do with whether or not she's actually perpetrating. It has to do with him winning, right? In this particular case, it has to do with him winning. He has to win. Truth be damned. And it's just enough shade to throw into the mix to make the jury, the judge, the prosecutor, the defense, the opposing counsel, the cops, everybody go, maybe not. Right? When they got evidence with their own eyes, they're truly being led to not believe their own lies because, well, maybe it didn't go down this way. And it's really sick. And it's not easy to understand unless you practice this for a living. Be careful, because when you stare into the abyss, sometimes the abyss stares back at you, right? Like you can really fall into some strong black-pilled, very negative mindsets when you do this kind of work for a living, especially when you're dealing with this level of psychopathology. So I just want to throw that in there because this is not news to me at all. This is old hat almost. I deal with this regularly. I did want to get some other questions though. Gun Food asked if you like, you mentioned drugs a few times. Were drugs prevalent, and was that an actual concern, or was that just part of your paranoia and your hysteria at the time? And also, he was wondering, and as was I, like, if you changed the safe code, why did you take the gun out of the house in the first place? And I think I know the answer to that, but I want to hear you take on both those questions.
The stuff with the guns is, again, I didn't know who Chris was anymore. I didn't know what he was capable of, and I knew that he would do anything, to get me in trouble at this point.
Right. That's part of the whole world inverting, right? Your whole world inverts when you go, whoa, who is this? And
exactly.
How did I fall into this?
I'm just thinking of ways that, oh my God, this is potentially how he's going to jam me up or get me in trouble. So anything and everything was on the table at that point. So that's why that was like my first thought, like, oh my God, he probably broke into my car and I'm getting pulled over and there's guns now, or not guns, drugs now hidden all in my car. So, anything was on the table, again, because I just didn't know who I was dealing with at this point. And what was the second part of that question, Jake?
Well, it's the drug part. And I kind of want to speak to this real quick, Kelly. I don't want to take away from your story, but gun, I went through a very messy divorce. My close friends know how messy it got. And I was not on drugs. And it's a similar situation of the type of person that Chris was, my ex-wife was. And she was telling everybody that she could talk to, Mike's on drugs. She actually said it so many times and told everybody, wait till we go to court, that I started doubting myself, because I was single again. So I was going out with friends, going to nightclubs, and I'm like, did she pay a waitress to slip some Molly in like the bottle or something? Like, how does she know I'm going to test positive when I haven't done a drug? So I totally understand, Kelly, like your paranoia, because I had that exact same paranoia. Now, unlike you and Christopher, I have a good working parenting relationship with my ex-wife now. And when we talk about why she did those things, she literally says her lawyer was setting up a playbook. She was listening to the wrong people. He said, "Oh, he's out at at Pure nightclub. He's definitely doing drugs, all this stuff." Right. So like, that's her excuse to get out of like taking blame for what she tried to do to me. But whatever, that's a whole side note. But the whole point is she knocked me off balance. My attorney had actually said, when we came out of the courtroom, I have never seen, "Are you on drugs right now?" I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, you're going to go get your drug test." And he goes, "I'm going to fire you as a client if you test positive, because I've never seen somebody so adamant that somebody's on drugs and they didn't test positive." And I literally said to my attorney, I said, "Brian, if I test positive, I promise you I didn't take drugs."
Right.
I'm begging now my attorney to believe me, right? Guess what? I test negative. My wife tests positive. My attorney had to call me within 24 hours and apologize for the way he treated me on the way out of court.
Yeah.
So like, gun, that it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
Like, trust me, you start thinking, what bullshit do I have to deal with today when I wake up from this person?
Jonathan Cogburn drops a great comment in, not just because he's bullseyeing my own comment, but he says the function of this behavior is controlling the explanation of events to control Kelly. No attention to the impact of the quality of the relationship or health of the partner, parenthetically Kelly in this case. And that's true. It's power and control. It has nothing to do with anything at all except winning. Win at all costs, power, control, must win. And Jonathan's a clinician. He's down in Texas. I know him. He's very spot on about this. And once somebody turns the corner mentally around the idea that nothing in a psychopathological relationship matters except winning or one-upsmanship or controlling the narrative or coercion or predicting outcomes, like once you realize that, everything makes sense. It's not right. It's not comfortable. It's certainly not fun, but you go, "Oh, wow, that is really evil." And that's the only explanation I have is it's just pure evil. I want to move on though and ask, there's another wrinkle to this story. You went back and tried to get your firearms license, which I think is just, I'm not going to soapbox it, but it's ridiculous that we even have to ask permission to get firearms. But in New Jersey, you have to. And you went and applied for a firearms license.
Yeah. So Chris is off of probation this coming October. And when I decided to get rid of my FID card, or agreed to get rid of that FID card and my gun, it was just that FID card and that gun. I was always told, you can reapply in the future, whether you get it or not, we can't say, but this is not preventing you from necessarily reapplying in the future. So, doing some thinking recently, like since obviously the show came out, from what I heard, Chris is not very happy, obviously. Because that's, the first time that I ever really showed Chris's face. So on any of my TikToks, I always blurred him out and whatnot. I didn't even use his real name. So Toxic coming out was really the true exposure of who Chris is, both by name and by face. So Chris is off of probation this October. And even though I live with someone who is a former cop and detective, I want to have the right to defend myself. God forbid I have to. And I also know in the state of New Jersey, because of how New Jersey is, God forbid someone should break into my home and my boyfriend is not home and I have to protect myself. I don't doubt that they are coming after me, especially if, God forbid, that person is Chris. So I recently made the decision to apply for another FID card, and I won't get into too much detail about what's going on. It wasn't denied. It wasn't approved. But what I can tell you is that I was never the Morris County Prosecutor's Office, their favorite victim. And since the show came out, I am certainly not their favorite victim. So they do not want to do anything, I think, that I would like. So let's just say they are going to be making it extremely difficult for me and going to make me jump through some hoops to try to get another FID card.
So you currently aren't approved by the state of New Jersey, the county of Morris, to possess a firearm.
I'm not approved and I'm not necessarily denied. My application is on.
But lacking approval is a denial. Even if they drag their feet for however long they drag them, it's a denial.
I would agree.
So do you have substantiation as to why they're taking so long? Because certainly there's statutory requirements for time limits, I would assume, right? Must approve or deny within a certain amount of time, I would think, right?
Right. So
no reason given, no correspondence with.
They've kind of given me, they've given me a little bit of the runaround a little bit as to why they are putting my application on hold. And I'm trying to figure that out right now, how I'm going to go about maneuvering through those obstacles they've set forth for me.
I'm guessing that this has something to do with mental fitness, because there wouldn't be any other stated or codified or legally pronounced reason. And if I can draw that conclusion loosely, I would also have to draw the conclusion loosely that you're probably not fit to have a license to practice therapy issued by the same state.
Mm-hmm. That would be a very good point.
Yeah. How do we reconcile this? Because if you're going to deny a constitutional right based on X criteria, and we presume that that criterion is, or criteria are, something to do with harm to self or others, instability, we'll just call it, right? Because it has nothing to do with competence. Competence would be trained, and there would be a very quantifiable metric by which we would train in order to check the box of competence. So it's got to be something else. How that would not extend to a professional license, I have no idea, right? So you can't have both things simultaneously. Either you're fit to practice and treat individuals in this care capacity whereby you have a power differential tilted massively to your advantage and could potentially cause harm, or you're not, right? And so you can't have both. I would think that if you presented that to the county, they would be compelled to roll over, or at least present you with their evidence that you're not fit, in which case you'd have to have them reconcile how you are fit to do the other thing. So I don't know where this goes, and I'm guessing you're probably somewhere in the middle of the fight and don't want to disclose your hand too soon. But this is absurd to me, and I cannot fathom it happening in my state. But yet, as I just got done opining about the deep psychopathology of people who are wicked, I can absolutely imagine it happening. Can't fathom it, but I can imagine it.
Yeah. And, I still think it goes to show, I always thought that people ask me if I'm still angry or, with Chris. I'm not. He is who he is. He's a narcissist. He's a psychopath. He is who he is. You know who I am upset with? I'm upset with the system, because I was always taught that the system is established to protect people who are in my situation. That is anything that from what happened from the beginning of this up until now, you're still not protecting me. I don't think I mentioned, but ultimately, Chris got off with a plea deal. He pled guilty to aggravated assault by strangulation, criminal mischief, and possession of a deadly weapon. The man got 3 years probation, never served a minute in jail. The system has done nothing to protect me. After they took away my gun, I hired private security that sat outside my house 24 hours a day for a week. I was so scared. I put funds into private investigators who, searched my house and did the system never protected me. And now that Chris is getting off probation, they're still not protecting me, because also my protective order goes away too. So there's no protection order. Chris could show up at my house, after October, and he wouldn't be in violation of anything.
I mean, not to be all cynical, but you're not politically convenient.
I've never been convenient since the day I became a domestic violence victim to the Morris County prosecutors also, and I'm certainly not convenient now.
And unfortunately, you're the first to, for the NRA that's been waiting on your case like this, or whatever your quote was. You're the first for us too. We've been saying for years that this anecdotal possibility exists, and here it is, staring us in the face on live podcast. and you're everything we feared would manifest wrapped up into one. A therapist, DV victim survivor, gun owner, had gun taken away, perpetrator off probation / out of jail, could threaten to come back, no defenses, no mechanism by which to get them because the state stood in your way. It's like so mind-bending.
Wait,
that
you forgot
we predicted
one,
all this.
You forgot one. Almost charged with a felony.
Oh, yeah. And of course, accused of being the bad guy.
Almost made to be the villain.
Yeah, you're the bad guy, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this is why we exist, people. Like, you want to donate to a good cause that's doing something. We're the cause doing something.
So I talked about, before we were on the show, you were asking my travel schedule, and I talked about the research conference, right? That WTTA will now attend every year. I was lucky enough to be invited to speak, first person from the gun industry. And I made a joke, right? I said, from here on out, we're the ones that are going to try to get in their way when, the dumb shit takes over. But I remember I was in one of the conferences, it's all a bunch of different presentations going on at the same time. So you got to pick which one you want. And I went to one on ERPOs, your red flag laws. And it was really interesting because every researcher, they're pulled towards our red flag law does so much good, right? Like and that's what they're trying to show you. They haven't done any research on the unintentional consequences. They haven't done any research on the things that could go very wrong with these red flag laws. And I watched this lady on this panel say, because somebody asked a question, what if somebody uses it, maliciously to have somebody violated, right? And she goes, the myth of the scorn woman is just what it is. It's a myth. And I turned to my friend Kenny Barlow from Regal, and I go, apparently she's never met my ex-wife. And we joked about it, but take away the term scorn woman, the scorn lover. Right. It's not a woman thing. It's not a man thing. It's a scorned lover, a scorned human could use these laws to their advantage. And she's up there saying it doesn't exist.
It does.
And here we are where a guy used it.
Yeah.
In her world, she was just defending women.
Mike, it's worse than that now, because now the same people who repeat those talking point tropes will point to studies like, and I forget which one it is. I just read it a couple of months ago, that say that of all the ERPOs we've issued in X state, only 6% or whatever were of a jilted ex, or we caught those at the door. We didn't allow those to be executed and served fully, right? They'll have some justification for, like, now the goalposts have moved. It goes from that can't happen to, well, it happened, but we caught it. And now we have Kelly talking to us. It happened, we didn't catch it, and she's still victimized being in limbo. Like, yeah. At what point do we put our foot down as an organization, as a community, as whoever we are that actively advocate for people's human rights and say, stop lying. You're lying for political gain. Stop lying. Stop it. Stop manipulating your research. Stop sniffing for the outcomes you want. Be intellectually honest. Like, at what point do we say it? Because I'm seeing it happen in real time. This is complete crap. Not only does it happen and we have victims along the way. It's the next stage is somebody actually gets hurt or killed. And they probably already occurred. We just haven't heard about them yet.
Yeah. So
the goalposts keep moving. At what point do we say, stop it? Stop it. ERPOs are not good. They do not work. In fact, we have emerging research that suggests that they do harm because they keep people away from care, because states like Colorado and New York and Washington State which is kicking the tires that they haven't actually fully executed yet, are telling people like me and Kelly with our professional licenses that we can actually submit a petition to a judge to have somebody's firearms taken from them as a counselor. That's not proper. That's not appropriate. And I'm not going to soapbox on that. That's a different podcast where I get to soapbox on why it's not ethical for us to do that. But at what point do we actually say, no, we're not playing footsie anymore with these ERPOs, pretending like maybe in some alternate universe they can somehow save a life, when they're actually causing more harm than the good that they're creating. Like, I'm getting really tired of it, because I'm tired of hearing people's stories.
Exactly what you're saying, Jake, is so true. It's hard to explain what that did to me emotionally in that time. Like, it's hard to put it in words how devastating that was for me, and how I'm already feeling unsafe. I'm living in a hotel for 2.5 months. My house was destroyed. Like, I don't know who I'm married to. Now my only type of protection is taken away. I can't even put into words how devastating and how unsafe that made me feel. And listen, I think I'm a pretty tough chick. Like, if I was struggling, I can't imagine what it would do to somebody else who might not have the emotional resilience that luckily, I've had at that time. Like, it was so devastating to me. So
Well, I'll
devastating.
tell you what happens. Suicide is what happens, because you look around and your world's falling apart, and you look
Yes.
and you see every piece of the system that's designed to protect you is failing.
Right.
But where do you go?
Right.
You take your own life. That's what ends up happening, and that's
you
what
take your
these
own
laws
life,
do.
or you throw your hands up,
Yeah.
and just say, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna lose everything. I'll lose my Second Amendment right. I think of, like, we have, my point to everybody that talks about, hey, well, if you just fight the unjust, accusation, right? Like, if somebody red flagged me, you just fight it. And I always tell people, I'm fortunate enough to where I have the means and I work from home that I could actually fight. I could actually, like, spend the time and go to a lawyer's office during the day, but I'm not the single mother from Compton. Like, the single mother from Compton, if she gets steamrolled, she's going to be like, what am I supposed to do? I work 2 jobs. I have 3 kids. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have the time or energy to put into this. And that's really, that's a shame that there are people. This is what I mean. We don't hear about these stories when people just give up, or, Jake, like you said, take their own life, or eventually get their lives taken from them because they're defenseless. Like, we don't hear these stories. They're just not in the media, and people don't pay attention to them. And then people never get to the bottom of the why in many cases.
And again, they're
I wish I
inconvenient.
did. Right. And I would have loved to have fight that, because I could have refuted every piece of evidence Chris gave. I easily could have refuted, because again, they're going off like this snippet of what he's giving, not necessarily the entire piece. But, in that moment, I had so much going on. And then on top of it, I'm being threatened with this felony that, like you said, Mike, I was just like, I can't, like, it is what it is. Fine. Take this FID card, take this gun, because you know what? He would love to kill me with my own gun anyway. So you guys figure it out. Like, you just get to a point where even if you can fight it financially and emotionally, like, sometimes it just becomes a matter of, like, what would be easier for me to do in this moment to deal with all the other shit I'm dealing with.
And that's how they win.
Right.
Jonathan put in
100%.
a great phrase. He says, I've just started calling this reputational aggression because it takes sex roles out of it. Someone is using reputation destruction as a form of abuse. Males and females are both capable. And it happens with females probably far more often than we give credit, because males don't want to admit that they're being aggressed by females, because culturally that's not a thing that we like to acknowledge. I know we're pushing an hour and 15 at this point, and we should probably come to a close. But I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about the work you've done with sexual assault survivors, and I'm sure you've had DV folks come through your practice. I'm trying to figure out how to frame this up for the audience. When you work in our field and you hear these stories, it's really heart-wrenching, because Kelly had means, Mike had means. They could fight this. They could hire attorneys, right? Not everybody does, because not everybody is wealthy enough to do so. They don't have the resources. They don't have the family support, et cetera, et cetera. But also, one of the biggest, most silent forms of abuse is financial isolation. And if you happen to be married to, or living with, or domestically partnered with somebody who's the primary breadwinner, and not like by a small margin, but by a large margin, they can very easily cut off your financial access, and then you don't get to fight it. So the giving up happens much sooner in the process. I'm curious, now that you've been through this, because you practiced for a little bit before and you practiced for a little bit since, has this shifted your perspective? If so, how? And what can we all maybe take away as lay people listening from the clinician who went through this horrible experience that usually we're not used to dealing with ourselves? We're used to guiding other people through it. Like, what has this done for you as a professional?
So I have to say, obviously I took about 2 years off after this incident from practicing because I just also felt like, what good am I to clients until I'm in better spot emotionally, physically,
And
and
that's
whatnot.
ethically commanded, by the way, for
100%.
people who are listening. Like if you recognize that you're incapacitated and not able to treat properly, we are ethically compelled to remove ourselves from work for a time being. So good on you for doing that. That's great.
Thanks.
Bravo.
And that's why I bring it up, because I wanted people to know, like, I recognized, like, going through what I went through, I'm a mess myself. I'm not going to be of good to any of my clients. So that's why I brought that up. So here's the sad thing. I think before I would have told and worked, and again, being a therapist you never tell clients what to do, nor even really give them advice. You really work with them so they kind of come to their own conclusion and make their own decisions.
Or at
But
least
I
that's
think,
how we used to be trained.
right. But I think I would be encouraging prior to what I went through, because I think I would have believed more in the system. So I think I would have been more encouraging to survivors, victims, to report that justice, they will get justice through the system and whatnot. I have to be honest with you now, going through what I've been through, and dealing with a lot of people who have been in similar situations to me and gone through the system, I'm not really sure what justice is anymore these days. I don't think I would be as encouraging. I would never prevent anyone from reporting, because still to this day, I'm still proud of myself for going through and cooperating with the state on the charges, even though it did not end in the way I was hopeful it would end. And he got this shitty ass plea deal, because I could still look at myself in the mirror and know I did what I needed to do. And that's part of my own healing. So maybe for someone else, if that was important for them and part of their own healing, knowing that reporting was doing their part, then of course I would be encouraging. But I think I'm also much more realistic now in working with people going through the system, that, the system isn't always very kind to victims and survivors, that you might feel as if you're the one on trial at some point. And if reporting itself, no matter what the outcome is healing for you, then let's do it. But if it's not, then maybe reporting isn't what necessarily is going to help you to heal. And let's pursue some other avenues that might help you to heal, because reporting, you're really dragged through the mud. Very rarely, I think, do you get justice in the way you think you will.
That's heresy in our land. I don't know. Jonathan's listening. I don't know how the other clinicians are listening, but to say something like that is heresy for us. We are not allowed, especially as mandated reporters for child abuse, for example, right? It's not always the best option, but we're not allowed to talk like that because we get branded as apostates and heretics. And there's another opinion that I learned from Mike this morning because I was talking to him about you. You also don't necessarily believe that suicide is preventable. And we are a suicide prevention organization, and we definitely believe in that mission with an asterisk. And I'd like both of you guys to talk about this. I know my opinion. I don't need to share it again, but Kelly and then Mike maybe weigh in with yours too, because that's also a heretical point of view to take.
Yeah. So do I think suicide is preventable? Yeah, sure. With some people who don't necessarily really want to die. Sadly, I've held the belief for a very, very long time that if you have someone who is hell bent against killing themselves, I do believe that at some point that person likely will kill themselves. Maybe there's something that I can do and other clinicians are doing that's prolonging that process. But I have seen people have multiple interventions left and right, and then eventually they sadly, unfortunately, kill themselves. So I do think that if someone is hell bent on doing it, that doesn't matter what kind of intervention we give them, they're likely going to do it. And I'm not talking about the impulsive suicide, because we know that those exist, where it's not a thought out process. It's something that's a split second decision that person is not thinking about, and they do. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the person who has thought this through and truly wants to die, and it's not a fleeting thought. I don't believe that every suicide is necessarily preventable.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I look at my relationship with, obviously, I consider myself a suicide loss survivor in terms of who I've lost, but I mean, I had one dear friend of mine who, when she finally completed, I was like, she finally did it, because she had attempted so many times, and we could never get her out of that, funk that she was in. And this is a period over years. But then I have, and those that are listening that know the story, the story of the president and dear friend of mine who took his life in 2009. He's the president of my gun company, and I tell people all the time, because I attend a lot of these events, and people say, well, suicide is preventable. 100% it is preventable. And even when I took like safe talk classes, they use these scenarios where it's like, yeah, that person's crying out for help. Like, that's pretty clear that that person's crying out for help. But like, when I talk about Bill, it's a different situation, because the night that Bill took his life, earlier that day, he was yelling at me because I didn't make my travel arrangements, and we had the same travel arrangements. So he's like, did you make all your arrangements for the trips we have coming up? And I was like, maybe. And he was just pissed. He was like, dude, you're killing me. And I remember he said, if you're not going to stay in the same hotels as me on these trips because you waited too long to get a hotel room, he goes, I'm going to kill you. Like, as I'm leaving to get on a plane, like, so here's a man that used to tell me suicide is a coward's way out, because we had a mutual friend who took her life. So he was vehemently, adamantly, against, suicide. And so I always said, he's good. I'll never have to worry about him. And if he's so against it that he's calling people cowards, he certainly isn't a coward, and he's never going to do that. But then you have him making future plans with me, and he's never had depression that I've known about, or he's never alluded to taking his own life ever. So I'm going into all these meetings with behavioral health people going, well, what about my situation? Because I don't think it's fair to blame, to put that on everybody else. Like, you missed the signs, like you did this. Like, no, there could be scenarios where there aren't signs. And that was the hardest part for me, is like, because I was with him like a month straight before that happened. So at the funeral, like, his family members, they corner me, and they would say, like, okay, like, what happened? Like, what was going on? And I was like, he's in a box. Like, there's nothing I can tell you, because there was nothing there. I'm so sorry, but there was nothing there. We were talking about the future together. We were laughing and making fun of each other. And he wasn't like, give me a hug, I love you. He didn't do anything weird like that. He was like, motherfucker, make your plane reservations, make your hotel reservations, or I'm going to kill you. I'll talk to you later. I'll talk to you tomorrow, And then what would happen is like, the family members would break off individually and like take me aside. And they're like, okay, now that no one's around, can you please tell? And I'm like, I can't help you. Like, I need, you know what I mean? Like, it was tough, but I tell people all the time, don't assume there's signs. Like, if you really love someone, let them know you love them every fucking day. You know what I mean? Like, keep the same energy.
Yeah.
And to put a bow on it, my take is, 2 of our 10 core emotions are shame and guilt. Shame, neurologically speaking, per Izzard's research, suggests that you failed to meet somebody's expectations, meaning you created pain or sadness in another person. Guilt says to go make it right. All right, well, if we hold out an expectation that y'all, right, the society, whoever we are responsible for preventing suicide, because the suicide is preventable, is the trope, then when it doesn't work, someone is responsible. Therefore, we all feel this collective shame because we, quote unquote, should have done something. And then the guilt kicks in and goes, well, how do I make it right? Well, you can't. So where do we go from that? We just live in agony, thinking that we could have, should have done something differently because I'm responsible for this autonomous individual's decisions? No. Right. Christian Conte says,
the Christian Conte drinking game.
Don't make the error of omnipotence. Of the 5 errors of communication, error of omnipotence is the one that says I'm responsible for somebody else's decisions, outcomes, choices, whatever. And that's just simply not true. And, hat tip again to Jonathan. He says, if the concept of emotional differentiation, according to Bowen, is true, then it isn't completely preventable. Individual agency exists everywhere to some degree, and secret struggles can be hidden, and they certainly do and are. I want to say that and have you guys share that stuff, because while we absolutely hang our hat on the idea that suicide can be prevented, and Kevin makes a point too. He says, we're trying to get before stage 4. So much suicide prevention programs, I'll put that in air quotes because, how much can you really do, is in the moment of crisis. Like all our safe talk and assist trainings are designed to intercede at a moment of crisis with some magical words or a 4-step plan or whatever to keep the person momentarily alive. But what Walk the Talk is trying to do is get upstream from that so people don't slide into that point of despondency. We want to keep people healthy. If they start to get unhealthy, then reroute them to health, not wait until the very last minute and then presume that our last minute interventions are going to work. And then when they don't, live with the agony and angst of failing. Like that's not what we want to do. So I want to invite people to really I want to invite you to change your mind about the idea that it's always preventable all the time, because if we have that idea in our heads, then someone is on the hook for doing the prevention. And when it doesn't happen, we all just live in perpetual pain because we failed them. So that's not true. And I just encourage everybody to, like Mike says, tell them you love them every day. Keep yourselves healthy. Know what your brain is doing in response to environment. Get some exercise.
On that note, Jake froze.
Starting off the podcast and ending it in the same way with you, Ving.
And I'm at 99% uploading, so apparently I'm still flowing, but whatever.
I have 2 things I want to draw attention to real quick.
German Shepherd puppies is one of them.
First off, that's a third. How safe did you feel New Jersey was when they got you for those extra 2 rounds in the magazine? Did you feel like all crime was solved in Camden and Newark?
Right.
And, like we had solved it,
you
right?
Guys,
like we got her.
You got me.
We got her.
Now charge me with that felony. Punish me like I should be
Kelly,
punished for those 2 extra bullets, you assholes. Yeah.
Well, there's no real crime to be prosecuted. They have to go after Kelly's bullets.
Right. In the grand scheme of things, thank God they got me off the street.
Yeah, I'll have to figure. I haven't looked at the rankings of how safe New Jersey is, but it's got to be
10 times safer, right? My neighbors must have breathed a sigh of relief when they found out that my gun was taken away because of those 2 extra bullets.
Okay, so the second thing is I'm assuming, because it's New Jersey, and for those listeners that know, this is our Bible, right? And Jake, right? Like Pirelli's, you got it.
We got the follow up.
Sort of. He's going to get there. You got both of them?
What is going on here?
Yeah. So the reason why he wrote this book is because he was asked to do a mental health evaluation on giving somebody's guns back. And he was like, okay, like what, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, or I say anything out of pocket, but it was kind of like, what are the standards? Like, what are the things we're looking for? There has to be some benchmark, and there wasn't. So he ended up with this when he did a deep dive into it. So my assumption is, because I feel like the prosecution, the prosecutors this is not a good look for them, but they're gonna try to make you look like you're crazy. I'm sure of it.
Huh?
I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, I'm
but sure of it. Yeah, because it's Jersey. Yeah,
and because I'm their favorite victim. So why would they do anything differently?
So the irony here is that they're probably going to ask for a mental health evaluation, right?
Probably.
And the irony is they're going to be asking somebody who can give a mental health evaluation on whether someone
can I do it for myself?
Like who normally, yeah, like that's what I mean. Can you police your own internal affairs? Can you be like, listen, I've talked to Kelly and she's fine.
Right.
I don't know. It's just, there's so much irony in that. It's ridiculous. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think it's if that is something that they want me to do, then I will gladly do that for them. But it's here's the other thing. And I just, at what point, how does someone, I guess that's the chronic problem where there's a lot of therapists that won't do these things because who's going to put their name on something that allows someone to have a firearm or not? So, I will find someone who will sit down and do that psychiatric evaluation for me and, see what their determination is whether or not I am safe enough to myself and other people to be able to have an FID card and firearm. But not every clinician will do that. So,
almost none will.
Yeah.
Almost none will. And I'll tell you why.
I don't.
It's because, I won't either. It's just not worth my time, frankly.
Yeah.
but I'm not talking about that. We don't have that in my state. My state is still purple-ish. But child custody evaluations, we're allowed to do them by ethic, by training. We don't because most of our professors and supervisors impregnate us with a ton of fear about lawsuits lurking around every corner, which simply isn't true because if you look at our professional liability insurance, it's like ridiculously cheap. And if it were true that we get sued around every corner, our professional liability insurance would be like sky high, and it's not. So I'm going to listen to the actuaries, not my professors who live in fear of like, don't put anything on social media because they could find you and you could treat without consent, whatever. But it's like collectively, even when we write up a treatment summary for a patient who's, needs it for probation or juvenile services or whatever, when we write up a treatment summary, it's like we've all forgotten the phrase "at this juncture." Like we don't have a crystal ball. And I think the state, whether it's a judge or a prosecutor or the social worker or whatever it is, CPS person, they're like, just tell us, Mr. Professional, that this person's going to be okay forever. It's like, I can't make that promise. So we ourselves could totally do that. We could help out humanity by doing these evaluations for all sorts of things. By just saying at present juncture, this person looks okay. Now, 5 minutes from now, they may blow up at the McDonald's because they got their cheeseburger cooked incorrectly. I'm not on the hook for that because I did my evaluation 5 minutes prior to that. So we live in fear, and that's not good. But also, I don't necessarily know that we should play along with the system that's compelling us into this gatekeeping. I don't know that that's an appropriate role for us to play.
Agree.
So
yeah. So Kelly, tell us about the canines. We got people in the chat.
So again, like as you guys all know, my gun's taken away. I have zero way to defend myself. And someone had brought up to me, like, why don't you get a trained protection dog? And, maybe this is my own ignorance at the time, but like, I'm thinking, wow, like a normal person can have something. Like I knew these dogs existed, but I thought they were like trained canines for the police or the military. I didn't realize your average lay person could have one. So I, of course, jump on Google, and we're in the middle of COVID. So there's not that much, I couldn't necessarily fly around to different places to see these dogs. But I found someone great up in Randolph, New Jersey. His name is Bobby Gurla, who he's now become a very close friend of Metro Canine Academy. And I'm looking on his website and I see that he has these trained, protection dogs. So I call him and I say, listen, here's my situation. It's pretty bad. I'm going to send you this video that I have of what my house looked like, because maybe if you see what like I'm dealing with, that'll help you determine, which one of your dogs might be a fit for me. So I send him a video of my house. And he calls me back 15, 20 minutes later. And he's like, listen, like I've been around for a really long time and I've seen some really bad shit. And this is by far the worst thing I've ever seen in my fucking life. I don't feel safe with you living in that house without a dog. Like, can you come up tomorrow and we're going to get you a dog? And he had these two dogs for me to potentially choose from. The first dog was Axel. And he's like, listen, no one's coming in your house with Axel. And he's like, and I mean, no one. Like if someone comes to your house, you have to put the dog away. And at first I was kind of like, oh, I don't really want anyone in my house ever again. Like this is kind of appealing. Like I don't really want anyone around. But then I'm like, no, I think eventually at some point I might want to have a friend over. So maybe Axel isn't the dog for me. So then the other dog was Stella, who I ended up getting. And Stella, the way he phrased it to me was like, listen, no one is also getting in your house with Stella, but if you take Stella outside and introduce Stella to whoever you're having come over, and Stella sees that you're allowing this person in your house, she's going to hang around, but she'll be okay. And that's exactly how Stella is. So I always tell this story about how I knew Stella was for me. When I went up there to meet Stella, one of his workers brought Stella out. And Stella, she's become more lovey as she's gotten older. But, she's not a very lovey dog. So she just sat down next to me and I'm kind of petting her. And this guy starts approaching us to come talk to me. And he was a stranger. I didn't know who he was. And I kid you not, Stella's on my left-hand side. She takes her right paw and like puts it over my foot and then leans her body against my leg, almost to be like in that moment saying like, I've got you. And it was that moment that I'm like, this is my dog. And she came home, a few days later, and I kept up with the training. I originally thought like, I get this trained protection dog and like, that's it. But no, like you have to keep up. You have to keep up with the training. But I also fell in love with the training to the point where I then got my middle dog, who's going to be 3 in September, Luca, that I now compete with him in Schutzen competitions, which is tracking, obedience, and bite work. And I recently just got a Doberman puppy who just turned 1 year old. So I just fell in love with the confidence, the empowerment that not only these dogs gave me, but also the training. So about 1.5 years ago, I woke up and I was kind of like, I want to be able to do something good with my situation for other survivors, something tangible, not just telling my story, which is important, but something tangible. And I thought, I want to give what these dogs have given me to other survivors. So then I thought, what better way to do that than through a nonprofit? And that's how Kelly's Canines was born. And we really just launched in October. So coming up about a year, we have our first survivor who is about to take home her protection dog. And the way Kelly's Canines works is, you go to our website, survivors fill out an application, then is a Zoom or a phone interview. Then, we do a home visit and whatnot. So it's a whole process to get accepted. But the important piece is although they're getting this trained protection dog, we bring in the survivor for training as well. So they join their already trained dog in the training because in essence, like we're giving you a weapon, you need to know how to use your weapon. And really we're building a community. The survivor, becomes part of our little community for life because at some point, once they're done with the training process, they'll have to recertify their dog with us once every 6 months. So it's a way for us to not only keep tabs on the dogs, but to maintain relationships with the survivors.
I don't know what this is, but DJ asked if you ever considered competing in French ring. Does that
Oh my
sound
God,
familiar?
French ring? Yeah, I mean, that's some crazy shit. So Schutzen crazy, but French ring is the amount of work that goes into training for French ring is just insane. I would love to do it. I don't know if I have the time, if that makes sense, which I'm
What
sure he
is
will.
it?
It's really
Tactical
hard
or?
to explain. And I don't even know as much about it as probably he does. Because I think maybe then he's more involved in French ring than I would be. Schutzend is more simplified. French ring, it's all these sorts of testing that the dog goes through to really test its nerves, to test its fight work, to test its obedience. But when I tell you it's filled with like crazy stuff that you have to prepare your dog for, the training that just goes into it is the time. It's amazing.
Yeah, when you talked about your dogs, it reminds me of what was that show where she has the dragons? Game of Thrones.
Khaleesi, yeah.
Khaleesi, like she has the
Yeah.
dragons, like you have the dogs. Like now I feel that same way because I have 3 dogs and well, I had 4, obviously I went through it last week, but I tell my daughters all the time, I'm like, no one's breaking into this house. Like they have to really want to get in
Right.
here.
I almost sometimes I'm like, I hope someone breaks in this house because my dogs are dying for a live bite. Like, and I want to see it. Like, I'm like, yeah, please. Sometimes I leave my doors unlocked because my dogs are insane over territory. So over the house, over the car, over me. But if you walk by my car and my dogs are in the car, you literally are like, oh my God. Sometimes I'll leave the door unlocked because I just want to see if someone will come. But like, it's funny you bring that up with Khaleesi and like the dragons around her because that's what like the dogs really became for me. When I tell you after this incident happened, I did not leave my house for really over a year. There were two places I would go, and it was Quick Check and CVS. And I became again like a little obsessive compulsive with things because of the paranoia I was experiencing. So I would give myself 10 minutes and literally time myself. Like, okay, I have 10 minutes to get to CVS to get what I want and to get back. And I would call my neighbors and tell them, like, if I'm not back in 10 minutes, something happened. Chester, who I had at the time, I would walk him up and no more around the block walks because it wasn't safe anymore. So I'd walk him up the street and back a few times a day, but I'd call the neighbor and say, okay, can you watch out for me? Like, once I got Stella, that all changed. Like, I even think Chester knew why she was there. Like, he didn't get along with other dogs. He got along with her. I think he knew she was there to keep us safe. And, I left my house because I brought her. I walked around the block. So the change and the healing these dogs provide it's been life-changing for me.
And was Stella in the show, which I want everybody who can go check it out, go watch it, right? It's on Max. It's really good. Like I did, like I said at the beginning of the show, I was like, yeah, I wasn't even paying attention. Then now I'm on like episode 7 and I'm like fully invested in all these different situations, which are insane. But in the show, don't you say like, you think Chris was sending a message by throwing the dog treats into the yard?
Yeah.
Right?
So in August of 2020, literally when I just got Stella home, and it was when Chester was still alive. Chester passed away in June of 2022 related to this incident. But I woke up in the morning and I took the dogs out, and Chester like beelines it towards the fence. And I'm like, what is going on? So I run after him because I see him eating something. And all along the back of my fence are chocolate covered pretzels. And that was one of Chris's favorite things to get me. So, and again, you'll love this, Jake, because the psychology of this, you'll love this. So not only do I think Chris was trying to kill my dogs, I also think he was sending a message like, I can get to you. And then think about it. I remember I called my lawyers. And thank God I was able to maintain a sense of humor throughout the whole last 4 years. I even think maybe it made me a little funnier. But like, I remember calling my lawyers and I'm like, who the fuck do I call? Willy Wonka? Because I can't call the police and say, hey, listen, Chris is now throwing chocolate covered pretzels over my fence. Like, who do I file this report with? Like, I can't call the cops. But that's the sick shit Chris would do, because who do I call? The cops would have been like, this woman's literally lost her mind. So yeah, but again, it was that power and control. Like, look, like, this is something I can do that you'll know what I'm doing, but you really can't do anything about it.
And not just any chocolate snack, your chocolate snack.
That
right?
would make me know it was him. Right?
Exactly. And no one else would know. And if questioned, they would assume you left them out there because that's your snack, right? Yeah, it's very, very twisted.
It's so twisted.
So for people who don't like mammals, would you consider like Kelly's Komodos down the line or something like
that? Sure. Why not? We're open
dragons.
Open to anything.
Yeah, dragons.
I want a toothless, by the way.
Yeah.
Toothless.
I gotta send you your dog.
Yeah.
Not through mail though. We'll fly your dog there. Maybe on a dragon.
Well, this has been educational and impassioned and really, I mean, for me, enjoyable, and it may sound twisted, but yeah, this is what we do for a living, right? And we try to bring information to people and hope too. So I hope everybody else enjoyed it. How do people reach you?
So I am on all social media platforms, both Kelly's Canines Tales of Courage, as well as Real Talk with Kelly. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Website is www.kellyscanines.org. That's how you can find out and get information about Kelly's Canines, our application, a place to donate. Therapy, the group practice is Thrive Therapy Services, and my individual is Kelly Sutliff, LPC LC. So yeah, you can reach out to me. I'm very interactive. As Michael tell you, when he reached out, I reached right back out. I love to interact with people. I think, everyone is doing a lot of important work, and, thank you guys. I think you guys are doing such important work, and I'm really just grateful that you had me on.
Well, you're a great guest. You're one of those we can just, wind the screw in your back and you just go, and then we don't have to do much. I think you riffed for like 40 straight minutes or something. It was like, oh, seminar time. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That's by the way, the website, letter K, number 9S, KELLYSK9S.org. Mike.
Yeah, we're gonna have you come back on because I don't think this fight's over. Something tells me that you're
I
gonna.
would love to. I do think there will be more to share. I wish I could share more, but we're kind of just in the beginning stages of figuring out where we're going to go. But if there's one thing I think everyone has learned about me is, you never can count me out. I don't really give up. And,
Well,
when I believe in something, and I believe in this, I believe that, my gun was taken away from me and it shouldn't have been. And I believe I still have the right to get a new FID card. And I'm going to fight for that.
You do, and I think I'm hopeful for a positive outcome. I honestly am. But Mike always asks the same question of all our guests, and it's time for him to do that, I think.
Yeah. So Kelly, how do you tend to your mental health?
So, I don't want to give the easy answer, but it's going to be through the dogs, whether it's training and working them, or it's just simply going for a walk with them, or honestly, something as simple like my middle dog, my middle protection dog, Luca, he's a cuddle bug. Like, for me, just getting on the couch with him and having him cuddle up with me, like that's helpful for my mental health. Outside of the dogs, I would say tending to my mental health by, just being gentle with myself, doing whatever I feel is going to bring me the most peace that day. Whether it's, maybe it's going for a pedicure, or maybe it's going out with a friend, or maybe it's just spending some time reading a book at the park, whatever that is. That's how I try to tend to my mental health because it's important.
I'm glad to know a clinician in New Jersey now in case we have referrals, because we get contacted regularly from all across the country, and it's tough to know everybody all across the country. But now I know you, which is great.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And Jake, you definitely got to get her on noggin notes because I think there's a whole nother
Totally different angle. I do. Well, we'll talk more about that. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in and downloading and streaming and doing whatever it is that you do to listen to us wherever it is that you are. We sure appreciate the support. Please share this around because it just helps make Earth better, as Mike likes to say. So on behalf of our entire Walk the Talk America family, Kelly Sutliff from Kelly's Canines, we appreciate your time and we wish you all great mental wellness. Take care.
Thank you.